In the 1920s, Prohibition provided gangs with the opportunity to make tons of money with the manufacturing and distribution of illegal liquor. As competition between gangs increased and law enforcement struggled to break up the racket, everyday people were injured and killed from the poisonous liquor and from the violence on the streets. Welcome to an audio version of an original article by Kathi Kresol, operator of Haunted Rockford Paranormal Events, Rockford, Illinois. This audio presentation is entitled Prohibition: The Early Years, 1920 to 1923, and contains the 2015 story of the same name. This audio article is produced by Haunted Rockford. There are certain images that come to your mind when you hear the word prohibition. One might be sharp-dressed men driving fancy cars. The other might be wild parties with bob-haired women dressed in flapper-style dresses dancing their cares away as the bathtub gin flows. A darker image might be of the gangsters from that period, driving by and shooting their guns at people on the street, or police raiding homes and breaking up stills, emptying bottles of moonshine into the street. There are also stories of everyday folks getting very sick drinking what they thought was homemade moonshine, but turned out to be poison. The federal government passed a law that methanol be added to all industrial alcohol to discourage consumption during Prohibition. Methanol is a poison that causes blindness and even death. In July 1920, two soldiers from Camp Grant in Rockford, Illinois, Private George Girex and Luther H. Davis, were admitted to the base hospital after consuming denatured alcohol. Girex was in serious condition when checked into the hospital. He was blind and very confused. He had been at the Loop Cafe on West State Street with a group of friends from Camp Grant when he passed out. Fortunately, both soldiers made full recoveries. Girex was the one who brought the liquor in a small bottle. At first, the doctors thought he drank the poison in a suicide attempt. His fellow soldiers told the doctors the truth, and eventually it was all explained. During the period of 1920 to 33, there was a battle of sorts happening in the streets of Rockford. Sometimes the battle was between the police and the bootleggers. Other times, it was bootlegger against bootlegger, as different gangs fought for the advantage in the selling of illegal liquor. There were smaller battles as the liquor makers stole from one another. They would break into houses, stealing equipment, mash, or the bottled liquor from one another. In the war between police and bootleggers, one of the first kings to be caught was Stanley Big Steve Makeshades, a Lithuanian who ran at least 5 different stills and was suspected of running even more. He pleaded guilty to making, transporting, and selling moonshine. He was fined $1,000 and served 60 days for perjury and bootlegging. The newspapers were filled with stories of the raids that the police held on different houses where the booze was made or the speakeasies where it was sold. People would remodel their homes to hide the booze under trapdoors and in closets. Other bootleggers were even more clever. One man became famous throughout southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois when he shared his secret of smuggling booze and chicken eggs. He blew out the contents of the eggs, filled them with liquor, and sealed the holes with candle wax. His house was raided several times, but the police never found any of the hooch. He loved to tell the story of the police tearing apart his house while he sat at the kitchen table right by a basket of freshly gathered eggs. His secret was discovered when he offered to sell it to the wrong man, who later used the information as a bargaining chip with the police. The illegal liquor business was an equal opportunity employer. Men and women, white, African American, or Native American, were all represented in the jails in the beginning. Whole families became involved as people struggled to hold jobs and feed their families. Claims of illegal hooch being dangerous were proven in 1922 when Jeremiah Mutimer, a well-loved local man, bought illegal hooch and died shortly afterward. Mutimer, 43 years old, was going on a trip to California and left the house to buy his ticket. "I think I will go out and get a couple of shots of hooch for my California trip," he told his niece before leaving the house. When he returned around 5 p.m., he seemed slightly intoxicated and had no train ticket. He pulled the bottle from his pocket and drained the remainder of the liquor. As he finished the bottle, he collapsed. His family thought he was just intoxicated and carried him to bed. In the morning, his niece's 8-year-old son, Joe, who was Mutimer's constant companion, tried to wake him up. Joe was unsuccessful and ran to get his mother. It was then that the family realized that Mutimer was dead. The coroner, Fred C. Olson, was sent for. Olson questioned the family and learned that Mutimer had been drinking. Little Joe told police in the corner that Mutimer frequently purchased his booze from Big Mary. Police were very familiar with Big Mary. Her full name was Mary Bukowski, and she was known to the police, the state's attorney, and the people on the southwest side of Rockford. Little Joe accompanied his great-uncle to Mary's place many times in the past to buy the illegal hooch. In fact, on the last trip, just 2 days before Mutimer's death, he and Big Mary had argued, and Big Mary had threatened Joe and told him not to return. The county physician, Clarence Boswell, conducted an autopsy on Mutimer and sent the contents of his stomach to Kenneth Jones, the city chemist, to see if he could determine what ingredients were used to make the booze. This would allow them to determine which liquor maker had mixed the lethal dose. Jeremiah worked as a knitter at the Burson Knitting Company in the past, but had quit his job to move to California. He was home for a month-long visit with his family and staying at his niece's house. The family told the police that Jeremiah was a well-known man with lots of friends. His only problems arose from his drinking habit. It had increased in the last year, and his family was concerned for him. Jeremiah's death was later determined to be caused by swelling of his brain due to the poison contained in the illegal liquor. Big Mary and her son Sigmund were both arrested and later released on bond. It was eventually determined that the poisoning was accidental. Rockford earned a reputation for being so strict on bootleggers that the supply of hooch was well below the high demand. In 1922, bootleggers would come from all over Illinois to attempt to sell illegal liquor at higher prices than they could charge in other areas. This kept the police busy with the increased liquor traffic and with the skirmishes that erupted between the local dealers and the visiting booze sellers. The bootleggers started to organize into gangs in 1923. The Rockford Sunday Republic, dated August 17, 1930, stated the reason for this was to withstand the attacks being made on them by enforcement officers and to hold up the tumbling alcohol and moonshine prices, which were rapidly slipping down. The gangs used strong-arm tactics to ensure their success. The first reported gangland killing in Rockford was on October 8, 1923. George Minert, 13 years old, was looking for insects for his zoology class on the Fred Stoner property on the old Freeport Road that branched off of Montague Road almost 4 miles southwest of Rockford. Young Minert must have been horrified when he looked into a culvert and found a body. The man was later identified as Louis J. Malani. Malani's head was bashed in, and his throat was cut ear to ear so deeply that he was almost decapitated. He had deep slashes on his face and hands. A large 100-pound rock had been placed on his chest, and then his body was stuffed into the culvert. The police believed that Malani was grabbed from his rooming house at 412 16th Avenue, knocked unconscious, and then taken outside the city. The evidence proved that he was already in the culvert when his throat was cut. Police knew that Malani worked in the bootleg racket. They worked the theory that Malani had been taken for a ride by the gang for an unknown reason. They hit a brick wall in their investigation, and the murder went unsolved. Coroner Olson was approached by a medical school in Chicago. They requested Malani's body for teaching purposes. Olson decided that the body should stay in Rockford, in case family turned up at a later date. Louis Malani was laid to rest in the Potter's Field at the Winnebago County Poor Farm Cemetery. This is the end of our audio article. Thanks for listening.